Good morning, guys. A little bit of time's passed since my last video. It's gotten a little colder. It's a balmy 46 degrees in central Texas, which is not something we do regularly. But so I wanted to put together a video today on some wiring stuff that I want to do. We've got a backup camera and some trailer wiring. It's all going to go in the old Ram today. I want to give you guys a rundown on the kind of stuff I do and what tends to work for me. It's not going to be the prettiest wiring in the world, but it should be functional. And it'll be stuff that, you know, if you're working on your project and you're trying to figure out if this might be okay to do, it probably is. I've got friends that do a lot of wiring and stuff like that that will probably be throwing things at the screen, but that's how it is. So with that being said, let's get you over here and let's show you what we got going on. Okay, so let's start with the big thing in here. This is a kit. I'll probably put it, see if I can put a link in there off of Amazon for a backup camera. And the reason I wanted to get this kit is this kit particularly integrates the backup camera into the rearview mirror of the vehicle. It doesn't put some big screen in the truck, which, especially given the age of that vehicle and being an older one, I want it to look more kind of vintage and less obvious that it has something in there. So I'll look in here. What all is in here to start. First off, they give you a set of fairly simple instructions. They actually put their own video in here, which I'm sure will be a little more, you go to these links, I'm sure it'll be a little more detailed than even what I do. But I don't want to do that today. We're going to go through it how I understand it. So we'll start with, this is the simple, this is the back part of it. This is the actual camera unit that goes on the back of the truck. This will mount on the license plate screw holes, has a cord or an adapter here, and it has an extension that's going to run all the way to the front of the truck. But hopefully this will work, and it looks like it's got a little bit of adaptability in it. You move it around, stuff like that. And again, I wanted to install something that hopefully doesn't look like it's out of 2023 on a 1988. I want it to look kind of period correct, as period correct as you can be, basically hidden. So they do give you, if you want to be cheap about it or lazy about it, you can power it with this little cigarette lighter on-off adapter thing they give you. We're not going to be doing that, unless it's purely for diagnostic purposes. Because again, we want it wired in, because everything we want it to function like you would if you were actually, if you say bought a vehicle that had a backup camera. You know, you start it up, you put it in reverse, it turns on, you put it back in drive, it goes away. So we're going to work on that today. They give you these terrible little clip splices. I don't know if you've ever used these. If you have, throw them away. They're worthless. Don't use them. You're just going to end up with wiring gremlins. We'll cover some basic soldering probably in this video. If not, I'll also put together a video on doing it. I used to be terrified of soldering. Honestly, you need to go ahead and get some practice in it. If you're going to install anything in a car, just get used to it. Just learn it. It's really not hard. I'll do a video on it that, again, is more from my, like, ape brain of being able to solder and wire and things like that, and it works. There are some people that start busting out all kinds of flux and heat guns and fancy nonsense that it's great, but you don't need it. So I'll give you a rundown on that stuff probably in another video, or you'll see some of it in this one. So I guess this is the power cord we will be using. It's pretty simple. It's just 12 volt and ground that'll run. Technically doesn't have to run all the way to the battery. We may fuse it, we may run it to the battery, we'll see. But basically that goes to your hot and that goes to your ground. And that this cord will go into this adapter. This is the adapter that's going to connect everything together. This is the harness for the, I'll show you in a minute, the actual mirror. But basically this is going to be your power. These will run to the battery and the ground. This will run out. And this will plug into, I already checked the instructions, this particular cord. So this one will slip in here, and that will provide 12 volts all the time to that reverse camera. So in fact, actually, we might try and find a 12 volt switched source so it's not constantly awake. I don't know. We'll see. We'll get into that a little bit. But then you have these two right here. And what these are So remember, the camera itself has its own little pigtail. This is going to unwound, and part of it's going to run to the back, part of it's going to run to the front of the truck. This will plug into one of these. I'll clarify, I believe it's this one that has the, I think there's a resistor on it, but, and it will plug into this one way or another. There it goes. Doop. It'll plug into there, and then the other one's going to go into the mirror. Which, one downside to this kit, and I actually didn't even quite know this until I got it, but we'll work with it. So this is your actual mirror assembly. And it's nice, it reflects, it does the things it needs to do. And there's that adapter cord I was talking about that runs, will plug into our harness here. So, boop, it plugs in. So effectively, if this had 12 volts and ground now, it would work. So, it's now just a matter of installing all of this in the truck in such a way that it's not going to, wires aren't going to rub through, they're not going to disconnect, we're not going to have a bunch of problems. So we'll go from there. We'll figure it out. What I'm not as happy about is the way this is made, and this is on me for research, but again, I don't think I found anything any better. They sell this kit, and it is basically a clamp-on for your old mirror, which I suppose some people might like. Me personally, I would much rather it be its own standalone mirror, because that way it's just, you don't have to worry about these straps wearing out or anything like that. But they do give you a couple extras, a couple smaller sizes. But this is the mirror out of the truck, and this is actually the mirror that's fallen down out of the truck a couple times. We're going to have to clean it up, mount it. I guess you'll see mounting a mirror as well. We'll see how that works in cold weather today. But basically, this guy's going to go on the back here, and it's going to be strapped with little springy things like that, and that can be mounted up in the truck, and kind of seamlessly you'll have a mirror. And cool thing is, it should, when you put it in reverse, should illuminate up in this area an actual reverse camera footage. So we'll see how that works. Again, I'm not as crazy about this, but it is the way the kit's made. So, and it's not super expensive. So, I mean, you know, if we like it, maybe there's more expensive ones, but we'll go from here with this one, and I think it'll work pretty well. Next thing up, kind of simpler. This is going to be a trailer wiring kit. We'll just kind of piggyback this on this video because this probably will be pretty short. I already been under the truck and looked at it a little bit. It has, I can see some old, remember those pink splices I threw away, or the clip splices? Yeah, there's some of those on there. So I'm fairly certain I can already see where it used to be, but in its years as a farm truck, someone ripped it out and threw all that away. So what we're going to do is probably follow their lead, at least initially, and I'm pretty sure it's going to work. And what I looked at does look like basically the wiring pinout we're looking at down here for their pretty simple instructions. So, and this is a little plug-in tester that presumably it's got tail lights, left turn light, right turn light, can show you brake lights, stuff like that. So this is connected. It can even be connected in line with your actual trailer, but it'll show you, allow you to test it without an actual trailer being on hand, which is nice. So, got a bunch of wiring to do. It's going to be time consuming. It might be starting to rain later today, so that's going to add a little more fun to it. So with that being said, let me start moving stuff around, get a vehicle in here. It's going to be a little tight in the garage with how big the truck is, but we'll get after it and we'll see if we can get it all installed today. Okay. Okay guys, remember I said that connector, basically that cigarette lighter, might be useful for diagnostic purposes. So this is just dummied in here for the purposes of testing things. So turn it on, and that camera wakes up, and lo and behold, there's a reverse camera signal. So, and when it loses power, it turns off. So I think instead of actually going to the battery, like I was thinking, it actually makes a lot more sense. What we'll do is we'll still use that other connector, but what we'll do is we'll utilize we'll run one to the hot wire that goes to the reverse lights, and that's for the 12 volt, and the ground, we can go to ground anywhere. And that way you actually get that reverse signal. When you put it in reverse, it'll actually put 12 volts through that line, it'll light up the camera here, it'll run, and then when you put it in drive or any other gear, it's not going to send voltage through that line, and then that camera will turn off. So, cool. Alright, so let's see if we can find, I think I remember where that wire is, but we're going to have to look around in here, see if I can find that reverse light switch, and it'll give us a chance to diagnose, or I'll show you how a good way to find that stuff, especially in another tool you might be able to use. So let me grab that real quick. Okay, so what this is, I'll bring it a little closer. This is what is called a power probe. And again, if you are kind of a stupid person like me, who's not particularly wiring savvy, who sees things like test lights and like multimeters and starts to like, you know, kind of freak out and like want to run away, this is pretty simple. Now you do have to be a little careful because you could potentially burn something down with this. But this system's real simple. So basically you've just got these, which I think anybody can handle that. Red goes to hot, black goes to ground on battery. And then this guy right here will give you the ability, let me hook it up. Apparently I already got ground some magical way. What it'll give you is the ability to apply 12 volts or apply ground anywhere you want. You can also touch it to things. I don't know if you can see that. Let's see if I find it ground. It should. There you go, there's ground. It'll light up green if it's got ground. I don't have a 12 volt source here, but if you touch anything 12 volt, it'll light up red. The zip tie's on here in case you want to provide constant, you know, you can zip tie the button down, you know, real genius stuff there. You gotta be a little careful with this because you can damage things. It does have its own little pop out fuse, so it's not gonna like just catch fire in your hand. But these are absolutely worth the money, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of home diagnostic stuff or just an automotive repair stuff, or you want to install a bunch of these things. In my opinion, this is much easier and a lot faster to use a tool like this than it is to try and use a multimeter. Different strokes for different folks. Some people like the multimeters. Me personally, I get confused. There's too many settings. I'm not that smart. So let me see in here, see if I can find that wire, and then I'll bring you in here and show you that here in a second. Okay, so I've already figured out where my connection is in here. You're gonna have to figure it out on what given vehicle you're working on. But let me show you how I kind of figured this out. Now I had to figure out a little bit of stuff. I actually had apparently a connector issue on my transmission that I went ahead and addressed. Is pretty boring stuff, basically just getting some wiring to reconnect. Not a big deal. But what I'm going to show you here is how I figured out which wire we can use as our 12 volt signal to turn on our reverse camera. So in this vehicle's case, there's a very simple circuit. Basically it runs 12 volts to the fuse box through a fuse, and then it runs it out to the transmission. It runs into the transmission, then there's a little switch on the side of it. When you actually shift the lever and then put it into reverse, the switch makes a connection and allows 12 volts to cross it, and it will run out the wire and out to the actual reverse lamps. So it's a fairly simple circuit. I'm going to show you how I figured that out with the power probe like I was talking about. So first thing first, like I said, I've got back here, and I might show them to you later, but I've got a couple wires. Okay, a little bit of Bluetooth related issue. But so we're on that other wire that is going to actually connect us. It's coming out and running to the reverse lights. So now it's not lighting up bright red because it is a through circuit, I guess. what you can see there is we're now reading, instead of just ground and 0, it's reading a 12 some odd, 12.6, 12.7. So there's voltage coming through there. If we go to the back here, we do have reverse lamps. So we know that that signal is coming out and turning on the rear reverse lamp, so we can use that as our signal to actually run everything going on with this. We run the reverse camera. Okay. Well, so let's see real quick. These are the wires I was talking about. So we've got purple and white, effectively. White is the one where the power comes in and goes to the transmission. Purple is what it comes out to the tail lamps, or to the reverse lamps. So what I'm going to try and do here is something that, again, this is like I said, where some of my electrical people will probably start throwing things at the screen. But this works. I've done this before. It works plenty. There are cleaner ways if you want to spend a lot of money or take a lot more time. But let me show you what I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do is basically cut back some of the shielding here so we have some exposed wire. Then I'm going to take the little bit of wire that needs to be there, the red in particular is what we need. And I will, actually I'll do it on the purple side, my bad, because that's going to be where we want our 12 volt signal. The other one will just go to ground to chassis somewhere. But on this purple wire, we're going to cut open a little bit of shielding, and what we'll do is we'll just solder this little red wire in line, and I'll show you how we're going to seal it up here in a minute. But in the meantime, let me go and see if I can get this wire open. You can, a lot of times, kind of take a knife, razor blade, something, just cut your way around it. You don't want to cut all the way through the wire, and to be honest, you're probably not likely to. What you're just trying to do is cut back the shielding, or cut through the shielding to the wire to a degree that you can then kind of peel it back and work with it. And I apologize, it's a little dark in here. I don't have quite all the lighting I would like to have right now. But again, I'm just trying to peel back some of this wire shielding. Alright, new plan. These, sometimes when you have these wires and they're very old, they're not going to, you're not going to have a lot of luck trying to strip wire back. And the reason is because it's just very crusty and old and solid. So what we're going to do instead, take a pair of wire crimpers. Don't cut what you don't want to. I'm going to cut it in the middle, and I'm going to strip it back. And we can have more education on soldering and stuff like that at a later time, but right now we're just trying to get this done. Okay. You gotta know ideally, you want to know the correct gauge of wire you're stripping, or you can just find the right size that happens to be, you know, correct, because the way that, you know, it fits. But there you go. So I got two wires here. This is now how you would do a solder connection anyway. So now it's actually, let me make this work. So what we're going to do is going to take these two wires, like this is as if they had severed or something, right? Something got a hold of them. But we can twist them together. Twist these two wires together. Okay, doesn't have to be super svelte, but you can see they're together now. And what we're going to do is I'm going to take a little red signal wire we need, this guy. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to strip it back a little more. And this is much smaller gauge. Much smaller gauge. It's like 22 or something. There we go. Alright. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to twist it around this connection. And again, this is where, like I said, I have friends who do wiring. They're now throwing their beer cans and nachos and stuff at the TV or the screen because they just can't. You can't do it like that. Yeah, well, okay. But this will work, I promise you. So what we're going to do, we're going to take our soldering iron here. And you may or may not be able to see this very well. just because of the angle. But we're going to dab a little solder on it. We've got something to work with. Touch it to our wire. Okay, so we have now connected all of those wires together. Give that a moment to cool. Put my soldering iron out of the way where it's not going to burn me to death. Oh well, at least it won't burn me to death immediately. Okay, but so you can see we've tapped into that line now. So now whenever 12 volts goes through this wire to the transmission shifts into reverse, 12 volts comes back out, and on its way to the reverse lamps, this guy will pull off a little bit of voltage, and that should signal the reverse camera to come on. We'll have to test all that, but that in theory is how this works. Now what I wanted to show you too is a way you can, if you do a three-way junction like this, which again this is less than ideal, but this is what we're doing this, and oftentimes you're kind of stuck doing stuff like this, you know, if you want to do things fairly quickly and simply. So one of the things you can do to seal up a connection like this so it doesn't immediately corrode is take your old friend silicone, like a little bit of black silicone. Don't make a huge mess with this stuff. That's not what we're trying to do. I remember when I worked in a shop and I had old technicians, and one night I was trying to do something like this and I was in a hurry and I couldn't get it done. And I was like, man, how am I supposed to seal this up? And one of them said silicone. Kind of looked at the old guy like he was crazy. I was like, what? You can't do that. You use that for sealing up other things, but you can't do it for that. He's like, why not? The old man, he's like, he does it all the time. So again, I would not necessarily do this. This is not like your replacement for heat shrink. Okay? But what you can do is, silicone is non-conductive. Room temperature vulcanization cream, which is what this is non-conductive and basically dries as a silicone, as like a rubber. And is it perfect? No. But that now has sealed that up where nothing's going to get to it. You don't really need to worry about signals getting in, bad electrical signals, or it shorting out now because it's now protected. And if you want to feel a little extra safe, you can put a little bit of electrical tape around that as well. Electrical tape would have worked in the first place. I kind of like doing this when you have a little three-way juncture. It'll cure, it'll be fine. You won't really have an issue with it. It shouldn't be a problem. So, all right, well, next thing we're going to do, jump back in here in just a second, and we'll run the ground to chassis. Probably, actually, we might just see if we have an eyelet or something. We'll probably run it. We've got a ground up here, or we might run it to the ground on the coil. So, okay. So I went and fished through my pile of old stuff, like anybody who's worked on cars for a while should have. Just have piles of wire harnesses and things like that that you just keep. You never know when you might need something. You don't want to make a parts store run because you're lazy. But, so here's what we're going to do. Got this wire. I do have an eyelet. It's kind of an oversized eyelet. Let me grab also a little bit of heat shrink, because we are actually going to do that on this one. So, heat shrink. Okay. So, yeah, way bigger gauge than is recommended. But what we're going to go is we're just going to go up here to this body ground. That should work. And you can solder different gauges of wire together. This is like 22. This is, I don't know what this is, 12. It's huge. It's way bigger than it needs to be. But we can make it work. Same deal. Like I said, we'll do a video on soldering, but just twist it together. Fold that back on itself. You know, we'll see if the heat shrinks can be the right size. To be perfectly honest, we might have to get a little oversized on this one, or might even have to do the silicone thing again on it because it's big. But you can come back and clean up wiring. Ideally, you want to do things right the first time, but you know, yeah. So let me get in here with it. So I'm just going to slip a little. So ideally, I want to compress this down as much as I can. Okay. All right. Take a little bit of solder too, because we need a little wet the tip a little. All right, and this should. It's raining outside. All right, see, boom. You can solder different gauges of wire together, even if they don't really belong. Ideally, obviously, you always want to use the correct ones because you're now introducing potential. In this one's case, we're going from a smaller wire to a bigger wire, so it's really not a big deal. But in certain circumstances, if you were going from a larger wire necking down to a smaller one, you can have resistance issues. You could potentially burn things up. Bad things can happen. So what we want to do is avoid that. In this one's case, this is just going to be how it's going to be. So it's got a little bit of an oversized wire connection there, but I think we'll be okay. Unfortunately, like I was suspecting, ow, it's hot. I'm kind of thinking, yeah, the heat shrink's not going to work. So I put too small on there. That is a lesson for, you know, when you do wiring, choose the correct size heat shrink and put it on there so you can slide it back down in future. So what we'll do is I'll just go ahead and honestly probably silicone this one the same way and mount it up there. More food and drinks and stuff being thrown at the TV currently. Just people losing their minds. Let me grab something to wipe my hands real quick. I'll put that on there. Okay. And yes, I would normally grab the correct size wrench, but for these purposes, what we're doing, which is just, this was handier. Just loosen it up. I used to tell, when I worked in shops, I used to tell people, you know, what wrench is the fastest one to take stuff off? You know, like I'd be teaching a new guy and be like, you know, what size are you taking off? I'm like, well, you know, maybe it's 12, maybe it's 13, whatever it is. It's like, what wrench is the fastest? I don't know, man. It'd be like the one that's at hand. You can spend your whole day running around the shop looking for the perfect ratcheting 6-point 13 millimeter. I mean, you pick what nonsense you want on it as far as features, rubber grip, everything that you could possibly imagine. But if it takes you all day to find that damn tool, excuse my language, then there is no way you're going to get any work done. You won't get paid, anything done. That doesn't mean grab the wrong tool and strip anything out, but at the same time, a lot of times, the fastest tool is the one that's at hand. So, you know, and in this case, it worked, right? That'll work. I'll probably come back and clean up these connections, to be perfectly honest, with something better than that silicone. But that's just to get things going so we can get this installed today and make sure that proof of concept works, that it actually has enough voltage and ground there, and then we're not having to chase our tails elsewhere. So, all right, so next we run this through the firewall. I'll show you how to do that, or at least where I've got a spot where I can go through the firewall, and we'll see about starting to put stuff together. Okay, all right guys, just wanted to show you real quick. So where we ended up running that wire that we were just soldering on and everything, We just ran it through, a little hard to see, but you can see there's a little hole back there. We ran it through there. That's where actually the vacuum connections are for the air conditioning to run the vents, like your zones, whether it be defrost or what have you. Because on this truck, it's all vacuum control. It's not electronic. But in any case, so that's where the wire runs through. I pulled it through, and I dummy tested it again. I just wanted to show you. So the wire's coming through the dash, and we'll clean it up. We'll run it up the pillar and mount a mirror and everything. But the wire's running up here. It's connected to our rear view mirror. I went in, the camera's just sitting up here, but everything's all connected. Ignition is on. Yeah, I'm just kind of sitting over here. But if I push it down so I can change gear, I'll show you what happens. Put it in reverse, camera immediately comes on. Put it in park, turns off. Reverse, drive, and you have the lower gears. Yep, you make it up to reverse again, it comes on. Go to park, it comes off. So that just shows how that works. It also goes without saying, or I feel like it should go without saying, if you're messing with something like this, make sure that while you're doing things like shifting gear and the truck's sitting here, or the car or what have you, make sure the parking brake is set. In this case it is. Especially if you're doing things like I was earlier, it was idling, but make sure your parking brake is set. And also, it's good practice, chalk it. Put a big rock behind a wheel or something like that. You don't want this thing rolling away from you, hitting anything like that, okay? So, well, now I guess we can move on to seeing if we can run that wire all the way up around here to where the mirror is going to go. We're gonna have to clean that up and see about mounting a pad for it. And if there's enough wire length to run all the way to the back of the truck and mount that camera. So presumably it's all gonna work, so let's get after it. Okay, just wanted to kind of show y'all how the wires ended up getting routed. We're just moving along. So managed to, and something to keep in mind, you might have saw me doing it in video. I haven't put the last screws in because I just don't finalize where this is all going to be. But I used a hand screwdriver the whole time I was doing this, and the reason is because all this stuff's very fragile. If you're working in any older vehicles, any project cars, things like that, you need to be, if you're not cognizant now, you'll be very aware later that trim's going to crack on you, and some of this stuff's getting hard to find. So I just like to always be able to hand feel how close I am to breaking things, because you can see, that's already not in good shape. But so I ran the cord, like I said, from inside the dash over. It snakes up. Pulled this piece of trim, ran it up. And it's still, like I said, we'll tuck it a little more as we get this finished. Comes up over, runs across to where we're going to have the mirror, the wire harness. The rest of it runs back out, back down. Ran it behind this panel. Snakes out, you can just barely see it. Runs under this little kick panel. Runs across. Runs back. There's a little bit of wire, runs back past the carpet. Let's move that forward a little bit so you can see. Alright. And what I did next was the wire runs back here to a little hole. Now there was already a hole drilled here, and it's not that big a deal to have to punch a hole. I just always try and make sure I don't have to do it gratuitously, especially with this older sheet metal, because you never know what's going to become hard to find or hard to repair later. Now what I did was also I cut a small piece of hose. It's like some washer hose. I just cut it in half and stuck it in there with the wire, if you can see that. And the reason you did that, or I did that, and the reason you would do that is because you know that wire is going to sit there for a long time. If it rubs against that steel, it will eventually cut through, and if and when it cuts through, you'll get a short, and at the very worst, it just blows a fuse and nothing works. I suppose at the, absolute worst case scenario, you could, set things on fire, but most likely what it would do is just pop a fuse and then nothing's going to work. And then you're back here trying to figure out which wire was cut, shorting, and you're just kind of having to deal with it. So Putting a grommet like that can help, and it will cut down significantly on any wire shorts in future. Alright, so I'm going to flip it around now since it's raining outside. Finish up the last bit of connections, and then we'll see if our camera, if our backup camera actually works like it's supposed to. Okay. So we got the truck back in here. So let me see if I can start wiring up this stuff. Okay. So I apologize, we didn't get any good footage of mounting everything, but that camera is now mounted on the truck. Let me show you. It works. I still need to mount the camera, or not the camera, the rear view to the windshield, but unfortunately that's probably going to have to wait for another day. I don't think I'm going to have time to get to the parts store. But, so we've got this here. Turn the truck keys on, reverse, and boom, it's on. So we have a backup camera, put it in park, it goes away, reverse, it comes on, drive, low gears, back up to reverse, it comes on, back up to park. Okay. We'll now move on to trailer wiring, which again is fairly simple. They give you this nice little set of instructions for it. So on our vehicle side, we've got our white wire here, which is just going to go to chassis ground. So that's going to be pretty simple. We'll just run that somewhere to the bumper, probably same place where the license plate lights mount. Pretty simple. We've got yellow and brown here. Yellow and brown is going to run for a running light. So all that has to do is go to a tail lamp. Now that is important. It has to be a tail lamp, not a brake or turn signal. Okay. So, but that's going to be fairly simple. The all yellow will go to the left side turn or brake light. That way, whenever that light comes on, again, whether it's for a turn signal or a brake, it'll activate. Same goes for green, but that one's going to be on the right side. So they give you a little extra wiring to deal with, so you got room to work with it. So now we just need to crawl underneath, find our connections, and we'll probably do a bunch of our little juncture connections like I showed you earlier with the backup camera installation in the engine bay. Alright guys, it's another day. It's no longer raining and obviously very wet, as you can see, but we are now actually dealing with an entirely different issue. Now it's 35 degrees, and the past couple days have actually been a freeze. So it's finally a little warm. I can get to working on stuff. We're also fixing on probably moving, so I kind of need to clean up the garage and whatnot, and getting this truck kind of buttoned up is something that needs to get done. So we're going to tackle the little bit of trailer wiring today, and I'll show you how we do that. The mirror, it's off camera. I went ahead and actually got that mounted, just because again the weather's bad. It needed to get done. Truck needed to go back to work as far as just being a drivable vehicle. So I put the little tab up there, mounted the mirror. It's really not that difficult. It's a little bit of glue. Just make sure it's clean and you put it up. But we got that on there now, and I'll roll in a little bit of footage of it working. But it's nice now. It works. It's been working for probably about a week, so I think it'll hang in there. So yeah, let me bring it down here and we'll knock out the trailer wiring, and I'll show you how I'm going to go about doing that. Okay, so here's what we got going. I've got, let me bring it in here and show you. Alright, we've got, this is the connector that runs to our driver's side, our passenger side brake light. Brake light, tail light, all of that. So you've got 4 connections that go in there, and actually the connector's in surprisingly good shape for its age. But I already checked this when we had everything switched off, and all 4 of these pins are ground. Well, let me see if I can twist this around so I can show you. My power probe. Alright, well, I stick it in one, and you're going to take my word for it which hole that is because of the angle here. But so it is ground, or it was ground. There we go. That one's ground. It's the far right. What I've already found here is, if I back up and I go into this one, it's a little hard to see, but see it's reading 10.1. Now, granted, we want to see 12 volts across every circuit for anything we're getting power to, but given that the key is currently off or the key's on, but the truck's not running. So we're not generating any extra power, and there's always some parasitic loss through the wiring. We can reasonably assume that that's going to be our tail light hot, because I've got the headlights switched on and the turn signal off. And if we check these other two, we've got ground, and we've got ground. So we know this wire, which feeds into this left connection that we're getting the 10 volts on, we know that that's the wire we need to tap into for our passenger side tail lamp, or tail lamps in general. I'll have to look again at the wiring. But then we just need to isolate. I'll just turn on the turn signal on this side and find which one of these gets an alternating, probably around 10 volts of current. It'll come on, off, and that will be the one for the turn signal on this side of the truck. And we'll do the same thing. Luckily Dodge left them nice and exposed on this side. We'll disconnect this connector and I'll start checking wires. Like, so you can kind of see someone had something clamped in here before. Those are more of those little clip splices like I was talking about, that you take those and you throw them in the trash, because they eventually inevitably end up causing contact issues. So I'm gonna guess, because there's one on this one too. I'm gonna guess that this wire, which is the one just below our tail lamp hot, I'm gonna guess that that's actually probably the turn signal, and I'll check that here in a second. I just gotta get up and check it, but I'll bet you that that's what that is. So we'll take a look at it, and we'll see about start cutting wires and soldering and whatnot. Okay, so I've gone ahead and confirmed what we suspected, and that was the wires that have these little connections on them, little garbage things, are in fact our turn signal circuit. So let me pull this one off. Safety squints. Alright. So this wire is kind of maimed. It's not very happy. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you another way of kind of connecting wires that I do. Wow, these wires are crispy. Hopefully this works. That involves a little bit of doubling, like larger heat shrink size, but I think we'll be okay. Especially given that we have this larger soldering iron. Worst case, under here, if we end up electrical taping stuff, I'm not going to be happy about it, but we can make it work. But we'll see what we can do. So what we're going to do, we're going to start by taking that wire. I'm going to take my nice little cut and crimpers here. Cutting crimpers, and we're going to cut the wire. I'm going to go ahead and strip it back. Enough so that basically what we're going to do is we're going to cut the wire and just resolder it back together. But we're going to twist in the connection we want to kind of leach off of it. And that will hopefully, or it should, give that signal to any trailer wiring that's on here to run that actual trailer brake light. So we were going to do this. Let me try bending this wire over a little bit. Okay. Actually, a little bit. And what we're going to need, you know what, and we're going to cut that one too, because we're going to need to work with it here in a minute. Well, no, we'll mess with that in a minute. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and twist this wire up. I've already checked my diagram. We're looking for yellow here, which is going to be our passenger side turn signal. So what I'm going to do, I'm getting ahead of myself. Piece of heat shrink. So what we're going to want is one that's slightly larger than what we would normally use on this one. In this case, that's going to be this blue one. And the reason is because it's going to have to cover 3 wires instead of just 2. Remember, safety squints, not safety glasses. Alright, so I'm going to slide this over here, and hopefully we don't melt our heat shrink doing this. It's always kind of a thing, and it's pretty annoying when you do. So I'm going to try stuffing it back a little bit there, and hopefully we can get it soldered quick enough we don't just melt the heat shrink to it. That would be nice. Alright, I'm going to take my wires, twist them together. It's fun because it's really cold and you can't really feel your fingertips. You can't really tell if the wires are stabbing into your skin or they're just bending like they're supposed to. It's really just kind of a lot of fun. All right, so I got my yellow wire here. So this is the one that we want to leech basically off this connection, and I'm going to twist it around the other two. So it is now going to draw from that circuit. And what I can do is I can take my soldering iron, and this is always fun. Well, soldering, well, welding too, but soldering upside down. Always a lot of fun. Okay, so I have to solder left-handed, which is also not my strong suit. So start by melting a little solder onto our soldering iron, connect it to what we want, and let's see if we can solder this connection. And as predicted, because we didn't have a lot of room here, the heat shrink has shrunk and is likely not going to do us any good. Well, maybe I can nip the edge off it there. So, but let's see, can we? No, definitely have to see if I can cut that. All right, let me grab a pair of scissors. All right. So let me try nipping this a little bit of heat shrink back. One of the problems you run into a lot of times when you're soldering like this is if you don't have a lot of wire exposed. Now the correct answer, I suppose, is to just you know, peel back any wire covering far enough that this isn't a problem. But in the real world, and what tends to actually happen a lot, is that you just don't have, or you honestly you get lazy, you don't spend the time, but you just don't really have the ability to do that sometimes. So if you're lucky like this, I've got just enough room and pull this back. I can put the heat shrink over both sets of wires like so, and I can go ahead and take my lighter. And remember, fire goes up, you can't direct it, not without a torch, but take the heat shrink here, and since it's very cold, it is going to take a little bit of effort on our part to get this to heat shrink correctly. Oh, the lighter's great. Sorry, we'll block the camera for a second. See if I can get this to shrink. All right, it shrunk. And you get the idea. I'll bring you a little closer. So what we've done is we have cut that wire. We have taken this one, twisted them all together, soldered them, and put a piece of heat shrink over all of it. Now, is this the greatest solution in the world? No. Ideally, you'd like the truck wired from the factory with this. But if you're going to install this stuff afterwards, this is likely something you're going to have to do. So we're going to go ahead and do that on the rest of the connections, and we'll see if we have a working set of trailer lights. up now, so I've got the little tester in line. So let me show you. So we'll turn on the tail lamps. Okay. You can see the tail lamp, the one indicating for tail lamps are on. We have left turn signal, and we have right turn signal. So now it's just a matter of tucking and hiding wires away so that stuff doesn't get ripped off or damaged or anything like that while you're actually utilizing any of this stuff. Alright guys, so I wanted to just show you how this is buttoned up under here. Zoom it out a little bit. So what we've got is we've got our wire running over here. This is for our driver's side or left side turn signal. Got our wires soldered and connected on our passenger side or right side for our turn signal, and this is just tail lamps for both sides. We've also got our ground. Now I can clean this up and make it nicer ground at some point, but I've seen this done plenty of times. It's easy to diagnose, easy to deal with. It's definitely a simple thing to do. Just strip back the wire and stick it in the bumper with the license plate light, and that's working for now. And honestly, it's probably about as good as any sheet metal screw I would run in down here that would also just develop corrosion. So it is a maintenance item, but we can make it better later, but this is definitely working. I also got lucky and found at least Dodge put this cool little, they're kind of all over the truck, but it's a little bendable clip for holding up wiring, and it suspends it, and then the diagnostic tester has the ability to just wrap around and hang. So this gets it all up out of the way, and that way it's not visible all the time and not getting covered in nastiness. And now I'll keep an eye on this. It's very likely some of this may or may not come loose, might have issues that we have to deal with down the road. But that's kind of any aftermarket installation stuff. You kind of have to take it on yourself to go back and check your work periodically. Do a nut and bolt check, make sure the wiring's fine. This might be good enough to last several years. This might very well have to be adjusted a few times before we get it right. So, but I just wanted to show you how I ran it. Things to keep in mind when you're setting up stuff like this. Try to suspend wires in such a way that they aren't directly in contact with any metal, because today, or as of today, they're unlikely to do anything like to wear out. But if they sit there against a piece of metal, if you just had them stuck through, well, this is actually an example of something I need to make better. It's just so loose, it's not likely to be a problem for a long time. But if you had this tensioned against this metal, it's going to rub through and it's going to eventually short out, and it's going to cause all kinds of electrical problems, and you'll probably be chasing it a while until you remember the thing you did. So just keep that in mind. Suspending wires up out of the way so that they don't actually rub on anything is kind of the way you want to go about it. Alright guys, that pretty much wraps up the installation for the third brake light, or not third brake light, the trailer wiring on the truck, and for the reverse camera. Now, there's still obviously plenty of work to do, and there's still some cleanup and things like that that can be done later on with the wiring. A big thing that keep in mind when you're working on a project like this is if you just spend your whole time trying to make it perfect, you will likely never finish it. So best thing to do, get it together, get it running, get it figured out, and then just enjoy it in the time being. You'll learn a lot more that way. You'll cause yourself a little more heartache on the road, but you'll learn a lot more that way, and you'll get a lot more enjoyment out of doing all of this. So I hope this was informative. You got to see a little bit of how I go about it and how I went about installing it. We've got plenty more projects left to do, and I'll be putting together videos on those as well. All right, you have a good day. Bye.